Hello, I'm Michael Grubich. I'm the president and managing partner of LAK Group. I'm here to help moderate through a four-part webinar series called the Physician Leadership Excellence Webinar Series. In this series, we're going to take you through a leadership assessment center that helps identify capabilities in clinicians to lead an organization. We're also going to talk about the impact that can have on the organization, and then how you leverage that information to develop the leadership capabilities in clinicians. This topic is really important because physicians play a key role in the success of a healthcare organization and the overall experience of both the patient and the employee. The technical capability is a foregone conclusion with physicians. That level of expertise brings quality and a great patient outcome. However, they also have to be able to deliver great leadership experiences for both the patient and the employees of that organization. And when you have both of those, the magic really happens for a healthcare system in that they're able to deliver both the quality outcomes and the patient and employee experience that bring success to a healthcare organization and the system in general. To help us with this, we're bringing in two professionals and experts in their fields. The first is Kathy Oswald. She is the Chief Executive Officer of the Center for Physician Leadership Excellence. She'll take you through the elements of the assessment center and all the components of that and how it works and why it's important. Shelley Smith is the managing director of the leadership practice for LAK Group, and she's going to really focus on how do you take this data and help develop the capabilities of leaders. In this first session, I'm going to bring in Kathy to talk a little bit about the assessment center, the components of it, and why it's important for organizations to bring this in. Let me start by asking Kathy a question. Why should organizations consider investing in assessments?
Well, thank you. Thanks, Michael, for inviting me today and to talk about this important topic. I think it really starts with some of the things you were talking about a moment ago. Assessments really help mitigate the risk of turnover or derailment, or what I would call a bad hire. And if you think about it, if you really look at making that decision, there's studies out there right now that would tell you that one bad physician leadership hire can cost you over $2 million. So it really is a big decision. And what assessments do is allow you to really look at the whole person. So assessments bring a data-driven approach to hiring and development processes, which again, if you think about healthcare, data is very, very important. It allows you to evaluate your candidates in an unbiased way, and it really allows you to look at the how. Most of our interview processes is around the technical skills or the what of a leader, but the how is really important. So assessments look at things like behaviors, they look at derailments, they look at values and those types of things. And honestly, the reason most leaders fail is not about the what or their clinical skills. It's really about the how they get the job done. Lastly, and most importantly, they really provide a foundation for effective onboarding and future development. Many of us think that our job is done once that individual starts on the job. And the truth is, it's just the beginning. And that next 6 to 12 months is important. And the data from the assessments really help you build a great foundation for that.
That's a lot of great information that comes together with these assessments. What are some of the benefits for both the organization and physicians when using behavioral assessments?
Yeah, so let's start with the physician leaders, the individuals, and talk about it. The first really is that it really allows the physician to have self-awareness about their leadership, their strengths, and their areas of development. I can't tell you how many physician leaders, I was just talking to one last week that said, why didn't somebody give me this information earlier in my career? So it's really about self-awareness and getting that development and getting that feedback. Secondly, by giving them that information, they really have the opportunity to understand their strengths, their opportunities for development, and it allows them to create a very powerful development plan. You know, one of the biggest resources that physicians don't have enough of is time. And if they go out and spend their time developing and training themselves in areas that aren't important, that's really a waste of their time. So by having a development plan and using this information, they can get much more specific about it rather than a shotgun approach to their development.
Great.
And then from the organization standpoint, it really allows the organization to see it in a broader picture. So getting that data, not seeing the individual's data, but seeing it as a whole, they can really see where their strengths are for their current team, where their developments are, and what kind of development programs they want to put in place internally, and what do they actually want their individual physicians to go out and get that kind of development. Lastly, and really important, one of the things I learned when I was in healthcare was really the strengths of your physicians and how do you increase your physician engagement so you can increase your patient engagement. Number one strength for physicians is learners. They love to learn. And by giving them this sort of information and helping them develop themselves, you can really see your engagement of your physician go up.
That's great. So what are some of the components of a typical assessment?
You know, the first thing I would say is if you've seen one assessment, you've seen one assessment, because there's a lot of different components, a lot of different things that can go into it. I first think it's important to mention that these assessments are built on a set of leadership competencies. So you really are looking for specific types of leadership skills. And what's really good about them is you can customize them to what the organization needs. So really in their language, and also what are those competencies you're really looking for? So once you know that, then you can really look at the different parts. The first we talked a little bit about is objective tests and inventories. You know, personality, value, belief test. We like the Hogan because it really does a lot around normal behavior, values, but it also looks at derailers. What can go wrong in a stress behavior and what do you need to look for? Secondly, in those objective tests, you also look at general mental ability tests. Critical thinking skills are really important. The next component part is a career accomplishments and goals interview, a structured interview. So you've gone through interviews as you go through the interview team for the clinical part of it, the technical part of it, education. But this is really examining managerial style and preferences to those set of competencies that the organization says are important. And then lastly, our behavioral assessment tools. These are simulations that you really have your individual go through. Inbox challenge exercises, peer subordinate role plays, and business cases. And an important part is there are levels to these. So it's not one size fits all. Again, it really is entry level for instance, a physician in charge. If you're looking to fill a service chief, we do the mid-level, and then for C-suite executive. The last part is really the important part, is that feedback. And that feedback's given in two different ways. Certainly it's through a development report, but secondly, it's the feedback session. And depending how you're going to set up your onboarding, I know Shelley's going to talk about it in one of our subsequent series, is how you include your coach into that development discussion and that feedback discussion. I'd recommend, if you can, is to select the coach ahead of time and have that coach with you and with your new leader so they really get the feedback together, and then that helps springboard what they're going to do over the next 6 to 12 months.
That's great. I really like the balance of the assessments, the online and the logical component of assessments, then bringing some of the practical application and that personal touch. And the feedback piece, I know, is just such a great tool. Knowing that you need all that balance, what's important to consider when selecting the right assessment tool?
Well, you want to make sure it provides enough detail regarding those strengths and development needs. So you want to make sure it's robust enough to do that, and that it's consistent, objective, and you get impactful feedback. I think it's important that you get a lot of different perspectives. So you want to look at having many people or more people than one or two really getting the opportunity to meet the individual. Most important, you want to be highly predictive. So you want high predictive validity. And as you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, we put a list together of screening tools. Unstructured interview is really not very valid, and neither is grade point averages or some of the things that you look at in a normal search that you're doing. But what you really want are things like we talked about just now: structured interviews, personality, value, belief test, general mental test, and simulations. And when you put those together, it's really a very strong predictive validity. So the more of these you add together, the higher that validity goes up. And you want it to be legally sound and defensible.
The experience is really important. Are there things that we can leverage and you recommend leveraging to help with that experience?
Well, I would talk about technology. You know, one of the things I would say is these behavioral assessments, when we talked about assessment centers, we saw them dip a little bit in the mid 90s because the technology wasn't really there. And the way these assessment centers go together, it takes time to do it. For a matter of fact, the old way would be that you'd have to go to a location, probably spend 8 hours going through this, et cetera. So it's really very difficult. That's not the case anymore. Technology has improved this experience so much. First of all, it's just a very compelling virtual experience. What's really nice about it too is you can actually videotape them. So you can use those videotapes as you're going through the feedback. It allows, especially for physicians, on-demand online assessments to meet their schedule. So for instance, we had a physician leader last week that went through an assessment, and he decided he wanted to do that in 5 sections. So he didn't do it all at once. And we'll talk more about that in the next series, how you really can customize it based on the technology. Really quick turnaround on the results. So if you're a search committee making a decision, you don't want to wait 2 or 3 weeks. You can get this turnaround very, very quickly in 24 hours. And it does also allow you benchmarking capability. So not only how did the leader do, but how did they do in comparison to other physician leaders? Technology
Great.
also allowed you to reduce the cost considerably as you go through it. And lastly, really important, we talked about a few minutes ago about customizing those competencies. You can customize this competency model and make this assessment work for your organization.
It really is a great tool that helps bring a lot of factual based data and practical data to that decision process. So thank you, Kathy, for taking some time to go through the content of this assessment and why we would select certain assessments. In our next session, we're going to take you through an example of what a clinician will experience as they go through this process and the results that you could attain. So thank you very much, Kathy, for your time. And thank you for everyone who attended, and we look forward to seeing you in our next session.
Thank you too, Michael. Take care.